My name is Elaine Heumann Gurian, and I'm American. And I cry. Those of you who know me know I cry, so don't worry about it. My children don't mind. I want to thank you for having trust in an American to talk about what we have just experienced for 3 days in what was clearly a Latin American, Argentinian event. So I take this trust very seriously, but because I have been working with TIPA for 10 years, I consider myself the honorary abuelo of some of you. Let me tell you what's going to happen. I'm going to give you my thoughts about what I think happened for the last 3 days. They have kept me up at night. I will speak slowly, but it's a semi-serious speech, at the end of which we will begin thanking everyone. And those of you who know me know that applause is very important when we start to do that. But I've watched you, you all know how to do that. But at the very end, maybe stamping and yelling will be a very good thing to do. But not quite yet. So, I actually don't want a chair, because I've watched the people with chairs, and they look like a strange body. I have a mic. So what have we just experienced? We know it's extraordinary what we've just experienced, so we understand that. And for me, nothing like this has ever happened again before, and so I will try and explain why. But let's talk about some of the pieces. The first thing that happened is absolutely every single format I have ever seen practiced in every single conference was here. Everything, talk to each other, talk close up, formal lectures, voting, debating, everything. This is the most complete conference I've ever been to in terms of format alone. But it was a much more serious meeting than that. So I begin with my middle of the night reflections. Argentina is a country where a dirty war is still the very real experience of many people in this room. First-person experience. And the personal experience of trauma of oppression seems to be true as a first-person experience for many of the people sitting in this room, regardless of the country they come from. Today represents a time when there is evidence of organized governments turning to the right just when we thought things were getting better. And they are turning towards wholesale adoption of thoughtless racism and permissible disregard for the plight of others that can be seen at the borders of many countries. We have global warming. We have economic collapse for some, near collapse for others, and very recent collapse for still others. There's not a single person in this room who has not been affected by the economic trauma of their own recent past. And for the first time in my country, the United States, the phrase and the meaning of income inequality, the bedrock outcome of the capitalist society, is finally seen to be so outrageous as to allow one of our political parties to say that income inequality is no longer the acceptable price of a system we might want, because income inequality itself is causing the oncoming destruction of democracy. And in that word of broad social inequality, there are many museums, many of them giant and well-funded, be they government or private, that continue and voluntarily are the handmaidens, the trophies, and the playthings of the powerful, however defined. These museums remain impressive, often awe-inspiring, filled with beautiful objects, reinstalled using modern techniques, without changing their assumptions that they know the truth and we are there to learn. Yet these museums, the museums that are considered classical, are so well done that we cannot deny their special place. They are seductive repositories. Yet, here we are, in a museum conference where hundreds of people are committed to righting wrongs, promoting social justice, looking for paths of personal responsibility, and for the collective recognition of the rights of others. I might say that for me, this is the first annual conference for museum equity, for museum social responsibility, or some such title. And as Dylan Thomas once wrote when his father was dying, this conference is explicitly telling all of us as museum workers, do not go gentle into that dark night, but rage, rage, rage against the dying of the light. So here we are, talking with assurance about the necessity for museums of bad news, for museums that tell stories of the disenfranchised, of museums being explicitly political, of museums changing lives, and of museums that build community with the intentional cooperation of the community itself. And why are people here doing the work that they do? Because, as many speakers said or implied, when faced with the unspeakable horror of inhumane cruelty, social injustice, or majority-inflicted shame on those who are in the minority population, sentient human beings have a choice, and their choice can be their decision to act on their moral core, their altruism, and their empathy, and to build institutions that do the same. And others here, most of them young, have told me that without claiming and then publicly proclaiming their personal cultural affiliations, they cannot stand tall nor band together to become a political force for change. And the same holds true for those who are needing to reimagine our national narrative. And so these young people build museums. And museums can, these same people say, help build personal identity, dispel shame, and bring dignity. Words that I have not heard in a very long time. Using large and small examples, the museum work of community building and social justice are the majority of the examples on display in this conference. And this conference proposes skill building to help and encourage every one of you to network with others who feel the same. It is as if this was ordinary. This conference agenda moves in the direction of peace, of civic responsibility, of assertion of the cultural right of place, one small example at a time. Utopian, perhaps, and certainly optimistic. Over and over again, I have heard about ways to heal rather than to hurt, to affiliate rather than to compete, and to proclaim that museums change people's lives not by providing access to other people's notion of beauty, but to enter overtly into the issues of the day and take a stand. Yet, these same institutions are often, but not always, fragile, underfunded, and while beloved, their lovers are not necessarily organized or powerful yet. One of the implicit skill-building tools seems improbably tied to the sense of small and intimate scale, as if such a tool was the obvious foil to use against large-scale oppression. And it may be. What Sven Hockington showed us about bulk building, what the terms of tinkering and layering and prototyping are all built on appropriate technology, common sense, hand skills, and if the contagion of modest means counters excessive wealth, then we may be onto something. That thoughtful individuals are taking matters into their own hands, using available tools that can make a difference we might all emulate. There is a David and Goliath quality to it all. But we know that David won. Scale turns out indeed to be important, and small is the new big. I find this to be a conference where personal bravery is unabashedly, yet unassumingly on display. Here, at this meeting, are people I know and treasure and look up to because of actions taken in the public arena and often at great personal risk. But even more important to this learning junkie and me, I am meeting equally brave and impactful people I do not know and have never met before because of my inability to speak Spanish. So a room full of heroes, separated by language, age, and experience, are now colleagues and would-be friends. The power of networking is no small thing. And in a world often of loneliness, a powerful ally is a good thing for continued action. These speakers show us collectively that when the individual assumes a personal responsibility for leading from principle and are committed to social justice available to them within the frame of their direct experience, they can and do make a difference. And what's interesting to me is that they use the same levers of action that the right wing uses, because they too run, work in, and build institutions called museums or museum associations, and in doing so change lives and become beacons for emulation. And surprisingly, here in the room are a few institutions on display that are big, like the 9/11 Museum or the Smithsonian Museum of African American History. And they use the same persistence of community consultation and well-honed human sensitivity, and they succeed on the big stage. It is a big deal to me that museums that are leading from a moral core, often a personal moral core, are seen in this conference to make a difference, and all of us as witness and all of us as workers can now go forth and make that so. Maybe, more important, this conference is full of young, gifted, dedicated museum professionals rising in power and already making a difference, being taken seriously by the more seasoned generation and getting to know them on a first-name basis. And that pays dividends for our collective future. I was personally mentored by mostly men who saw something in me, and now all of us that were mentored, the elders in the room, are responsible to do the same. Do not hesitate to call upon us. But let us not forget, museums are the work of the collective, as are meetings. Museums and meetings are ensemble work. These are institutions, not individual works of art, and only when leaders observe team building as part of their moral responsibility do institutions thrive. It is not idea alone, but humane implementation of same that is called for. And here lies part of my worry. We are all trying to run organizations where a certain amount of discipline and agreed procedures is required to make at least minimal systems work for the collective. There are models of organizations needed to match the justice model. And these models of organizational administration are not so discernible. We're going from a system that David Anderson referred to as 4, going to 2, and now stopping with, without having invented the appropriate but matching infrastructure. Our collective vision of next seems not to lie in certainty and not in agreement, nor in uniformity, but in spontaneity, in optimism, and in corny emotional words like trust and love. We must learn to accept that there is no need for consistency but rather the opposite. We need the recognition that the humanity of us all lies in the fact that we, each and every one of us, take up the same amount of human space, but no more. And that we arrived at this time through different routes and traditions that do not need nor always allow for integration. The challenge is we are working on constructive collective action to preserve differences. And if you read that as an English sentence, it's an oxymoron. You can't work on collective construction to preserve differences, or at least it's hard. But that, in fact, is our challenge. Our former lives, or at least my generation's former lives, were consistently based on rational thinking, scientific reproductivity, top-down hierarchies, and the notion of progress as a constant. We were not trained in nuance, in inconsistency, in one-offs and unique things, and in the porous nature of affiliative but only functioning institutions. And in our interconnectedness, our thrill at being constantly in touch, the access to seemingly limited information in our hands, our youth who sleep with their phones, we are only dimly discerning what Seb Chen sees as an increasing control of our action by the very forces we are talking about opposing, by them linking simultaneously with our actions technologically and knowing where we are at all times. So I do not see the path to the next steps. So I do not yet see the path to the next step, because some systems, not anarchy, are needed for institutions to function even while being porous. But I know it is here somewhere. Where Seb Chen said to me yesterday, it is the workabout that is not yet discernible. The importance of scale, i.e. small scale, may be one of the answers. Yet the new 9/11 museum, so widely acclaimed, is huge. So we know scale is not the only answer. The hunger for training is palpable in this room. Look at the crowded Tipa Cafe yesterday when so many young people came to see if they could get a place in the next Tipa lab, a program that builds skills for those already experienced young people. They want it, and Tipa has earned the right to continue their work. Yet are we building the skills that match our aspirations? I continue to teach that all systems, no matter what systems we're talking about, are really philosophy. That you cannot espouse an intellectual, philosophic position and work using a different philosophy. We have just had a workshop of maintaining standards, and we all believe in excellence. But in our handmade, customized, but differing worldview, we may not know what kind of standards we're really talking about. I am struck that this meeting is sitting very close to the edge of redefining museums as institutions of social change and responsibility, even as we may be atomizing them so that they perhaps no longer cohere. So I see as essential our ability to start to make systems that match what we're talking about. but I have full belief that we will do that. Yet, even so, let me go back and read the part of the sentence. I believe that this meeting is sitting very close to the edge of redefining museums to be institutions of social change and responsibility. And I didn't think I would ever say that. Thus, this meeting is a paradox and a beacon for me, because I too want museums to take personal responsibility, to offer tools for reconciliation and the celebration of acts of human kindness. I want the institutions I love to be a counterweight to the inhumanity I increasingly see within the government and the commercial structures that surround it. And I have hope, because I see, after a long drought, a new generation, here represented by the participants and the volunteers, who are committed to public activism and who will take the collective stands against institutional injustice that I am talking about. So I am heartened about the name of this museum, of this conference. Because if you look at re there, which is in a different type, a different color, re means again. It means over and over again. It means we start again. Re is the preface that allows us to begin again. This at the same time that we're trying to overcome a barrier or a language difference, which the translators so generously helped us with, but which often masks cultural difference. The deeply different worldview assumptions across language, culture, gender, economic and geographic distance are wider than it is convenient for us to admit. And so I am back to the sentence I said before. It has to do with trust, taking a chance, and the emotion of love that must carry us through. Because we must trust each other even as we try to explain ourselves to each other. And the next that our colleagues are proposing, or some of our colleagues are proposing, is the creation of new networks and federations for creating collective clout, and I agree. We are together sufficiently large numbers to make a difference in the political arenas where our museums sit, and to demand that they start to look at issues of moral core, of social justice, and of the issues of the day. Yet the running of such integrative frameworks demands trust, and trust assumes some form of commitment even at a time when we only have some partial understanding of each other. This is a both and, not either or world. And in a certain way, we are no longer meek. The goodwill here is palatable. The organization of the collective is alive and well. This Congress is amazingly well organized by smart, dedicated, and unafraid people who have demonstrated that the next generation can do very well indeed. I am heartened. I am thrilled to be here with the common assertion that museums do indeed change lives and can be a force for social justice. And many others, all sitting here, believe that too. This is the first meeting I have ever attended where the marginalized voices are the majority voices. So, in a certain way, we are no longer meek, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't inherit the world. Thank you. Okay, so this whole thing was brought to you by people you know by email, some you know by faces, and some you don't. Some who chose to remain in the background, and some who didn't, but you're about to see them all. So first, let us talk about and thank the sponsors who made it possible for 150 from one country and 15 from another country to come here on scholarship, even though those funders almost never do such things. Let us thank the African American Museum Association, which is in the midst of building its own, the African American Museum of Culture and History in the Smithsonian, which is in the midst of building its own museum, who decided this was important enough that not only would they come, put money in, and bring their young people, but would participate fully in this organization. Let us thank the city of Buenos Aires that gave us this building, gave us access to things and money, and wants to revitalize Buenos Aires and knows that TIPA is one of the ways to do that. Let me, on behalf of my American colleagues, thank the American Embassy that brought us here, and those from Britain, let us thank the British Embassy that also brought us here. And let me thank the American Alliance of Museums that wanted to make sure alliance meant not only home, but around the Americas, and wanted to make sure that there was a dialogue between that big country and these rising, wonderful places. So thank you, American Association of Museums. Let me thank all the translators who had to put up with people who talk too fast. Will all the volunteers stand and start moving in this direction? There are an improbable number of volunteers. There are 60 volunteers who traded their time so that they could come here in lieu of having to pay, because they wanted to be among you. And for those of you from not Argentina and who have never seen the work of TIPA, and I'm going to bring them last when you're all going to stand, will those of you who have been trained by TIPA please stand so everybody can see you? And now, the moment you've been waiting for. Sometimes we refer to them as Americo and the Chicas, but not today. Because the staff of TIPA, it's going to amaze you how few people show up here, have produced one of the most important and most impactful conferences of all times. So will Americo Castilla and the staff of TIPA please come up to the stage and be recognized? Yeah, good. And now we go and party. Congratulations to all of you.